Welcome to New York, where 12 million drivers and 2 million white-tailed deer share the roads. I live in Orange County, about an hour northwest of the city, where the metro meets the wild. And every year, my county vies for the most vehicle-deer collisions, about 1,400 a year. Imagine an animal that can be up to 400 pounds, that has a top speed of 40 miles per hour, that has a vertical leaping ability of 8 feet and 30 feet horizontally, crashing into your car. Terrifying, but so commonplace. It happens over 30,000 times in New York every year. My first deer encounter was on January 3rd, 2000. And that evening, as I closed up the Florida Public Library, I was happy because we had gotten through Y2K with no problems. And I was unhappy because I knew there was nothing at home for dinner and I'd have to go to the supermarket and pick something up. So I headed south on State Route 94, and I was almost to the outskirts of the village when a deer suddenly bolted out from between two little houses on my right, smashed into my headlight, and I felt the jolt of that impact all the way through my bones and my brain. I slammed on the brakes, and the deer flew through the air, landed on the roof, kicked out the rear window in an explosion of glass, bounced off the trunk, and crashed onto the pavement in a flurry of thrashing legs. I pulled myself out of the car. I looked at the deer convulsing on the road. I looked at my little red Chevy Cavalier. What had just happened? In less than a minute, a pickup truck roared up and two guys in camo gear jumped out. "Hey lady, do you want that deer? You know, it's yours because you hit it." "No." And then another car pulled up. A silver-haired man got out. He said he was on his way home to Greenwood Lake, and he had one of those new cell phones. He pulled it out from inside his black wool dress coat, and he said, "Don't worry, I'm going to call 911 for you." And he did. When the state trooper arrived, he didn't bother to get out of his car, but sat behind the wheel, filling out a form on his clipboard. I stood at his open window with my back to the traffic and the wind whipping by. Cars slowed down. There were gawkers who were eager to see the scene. Some people looked distressed. Some people clapped or gave me the thumbs up or yelled congrats. It was an event. But this trooper seemed really annoyed. And without my saying anything about it, he informed me that the deer could not be moved until it was dead, and he was not going to shoot it because discharge of a weapon required another trooper as a witness. It took me a long time to figure out that his leisurely approach to the paperwork was to give the deer enough time to die. Or I didn't understand then that the same thing, the same scene, was being repeated throughout the county that night. It was 0 degrees and I was freezing. And Donna Schreibus, who lived across the street and was a library patron of mine, stumped over, grabbed me and said, "You're coming in my house to get warm." And I did. I called my husband, and he was absolutely no help in answering the trooper's question. Is the vehicle drivable from the scene? He just said, "Get home." It was an Arctic and dark ride home with only one headlight and no rear window. My husband said, "Why did you hit it?" I said, "I didn't see it." "Oh, you weren't driving defensively," he said. There was nothing I could do. I couldn't avoid it. Sounds like careless driving," he said. And so We got the car fixed, but I was happy to tell my coworker Teresa the next day, who was recently divorced and complaining about how hard it was to meet men, that I had found a way. Just go out and hit a deer, and the men appear, all kinds of men. My second encounter with deer, I was driving my mother's red old Cutlass Sierra, returning from a doctor's appointment in Warwick. We were cruising along Pulaski Highway, an official New York State scenic highway, when a deer charged out from the left and ran smack into the car door behind me. We drove home with a dented door. My husband said, "What are you doing? Why did you hit it?" Careless driving. My mom got the car fixed. The third time I had an encounter with a deer, I was driving the Olds again. I had inherited it from my mother. I was just coming home again, dark, early evening, and just coming down Figgles Hill on County Route 1 outside of Pine Island, before the flats with the cornfields, and a deer jumped out of the weeds to my left and ran smack into the front of the car, and just like the previous deer, bounded away. They don't always die. Sometimes they just wreck your car and run away. Well, you can imagine what was said to me when I got home that night. Yep, it was my fault. Careless driving again. A little bit after that, our son finished his 4-year hitch in the Marines and came home. And the only thing he wanted to do was go deer hunting in PA with his best friend, Donnie. And so the guys left, and they were out for 10 days, and they didn't bag a single deer. And I said to him, "You should have stayed home with Mom. I have a pretty effective system. It's called hunting with a Chevy." But he didn't think that was funny. We gave the Olds to our daughter to drive cross country, and my husband bought me a little white Nissan Sentra. I never liked that car very much. It was too young and too sporty for me. It had a souped up engine and an amped up stereo system, and I don't think it had a muffler. It was really noisy, but I thought, well, maybe it's so noisy it will keep the deer away. But the other thing I hadn't reckoned on was that that same noise would attract the local cops, who apparently do a lot of profiling. I was stopped 3 times on my way home from work. The first cop said, with utter disbelief in his voice, "Ma'am, is this your car? You're free to go." The second cop said, "Oh, ma'am, I didn't see it was you. With those tinted windows, I couldn't see who was in the car. Have a nice day." And the third cop said, "Oh, ma'am, are there any wants and warrants out on you?" "No, okay, goodbye." But I wasn't completely right about the noise, because one late afternoon, we were coming home from Middletown from doing our weekly grocery shopping, and we had just passed Soon's Orchards on Lower Road in New Hampton and going up a slight incline when suddenly a deer burst from the left side, and for a millisecond I saw that deer from nose to tail. It was the same length as our car was wide. It was a perfect match. And then the middle of the car and the middle of the deer smacked together. And then the deer bounded off. And we sat there motionless in the dark, not saying anything. My husband was in shock. Finally, he said, "I didn't see it." "I know," I said. "There was nothing I could do to avoid it," he said. "I know," I said. "It wasn't my fault." "I know," I said. "You're just going to keep on saying that, aren't you?" And I said, yes, I am. Yes, I am. And I thought, now you know, because there's nothing in your education, your experience, your skills, your background that can prepare you to suddenly meet a deer in the dark or the dusk or the dawn or the day, anytime really. And you just have to have a little bit of grace and humility and a sense of humor as well, and understand that you have just had a collision with nature and you are alive, and that's the important thing. So as the poet said so many years ago, therefore send not to ask for whom the deer aims, it aims for thee.